Welcome to episode 166 of the CUInsight Experience. I'm Randy Smith, one of the co-founders of CUInsight.com, and this show is all about taking a deep dive with the leaders of the credit union movement that make it so great. This episode is brought to you by our friends at PSCU, the nation's premier payments CUSO and an integrated financial technology solutions provider. Visit PSCU.com to learn more and discover PSCUTV, a new thought leadership platform hosted by PSCU Chief Growth Officer and an all-around good guy, Brian Scott, a friend of ours here. Each episode, they explore top-of-mind insights in the credit union industry. I have watched a few, and they are pretty cool, so we will link to that in the show notes. But today, while we're all here, I'm having a conversation with Mara Humphrey. Mara is the president and CEO of the Minnesota Credit Union Network. So let's jump right in. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited to have this conversation, and it's the first time we've talked since you've taken over the helm there, so congratulations as well.
Thank you. I'm excited to be on board and looking forward to it.
That is so awesome. For those who don't know you, how about, and for probably even some people that do know you, a little bit of background. Where did your career start, and how did that lead you to credit unions and where you are today?
Well, great question. Probably never envisioned I'd end up being president and CEO of the Minnesota Credit Union Network. My career path really started, I was a political hack, to be frank. I worked in politics, and that was my start, and ended up pretty quickly going to the lobbying side. And one of the fun things is I worked for a lobbying firm, and one of our clients was the Minnesota Credit Union Network. So helped pass the big charter enhancement for Minnesota credit unions in the early 2000s, one of the first big charter enhancements that they did, but worked for a wide variety of clients, really on taxes and commerce issues. And when the opportunity came to work for the network itself as their governmental affairs director. And since then, I've had the great opportunity to grow my career within this organization, but also within the credit union community. So it's been an exciting ride, and I'm really excited to continue that journey in my new role.
That is cool. That's a background that a few others have had as well, where they came through. When you think back to the decision to become the CEO, that's a big post, right? You're fairly new to the gig. Any two questions here. Like, what went into your decision-making process, I guess, first and foremost, when you were looking at that position opening up and applying for it? And then any tips that, since it is kind of still fresh in the mind, that maybe either people gave you along the way? I know a lot of people who listen to the podcast hope to be sitting in a seat like yours someday. So if there's anything fresh on the top of your mind that you have that you could share, it would be amazing.
So one of the reasons why I decided to apply for the position is I always love to push myself. And honestly, I was ready for the next role, the next chance. I've found working for credit unions really fit my core values of people, purpose, and passion. So love the ability to continue my career here, following those and leading the great team that we have at the Minnesota Credit Union Network. I would say if anyone else is out there looking for the next role, for a CEO role, I would encourage them to network. I think that's key. Really building up, I kind of put together a kitchen cabinet of folks who gave me advice through the search process, through the interview process, and have really transitioned that now as I'm in the CEO role to having a kitchen cabinet of folks to give me advice as I'm jumping into the new role. And, there's always those things that come up that you haven't thought about or you don't know. And so having those resources has been tremendous. I also went through and I hired an executive coach to help me through the process, and that was very valuable. And I would encourage anyone who's looking at taking the next jump, whether it's the CEO or another role, to have those people in their corner to help them through the process.
It's amazing how many people who, the CEOs who have been on this podcast talk about the benefit they received from hiring an executive coach. That idea that Tiger Woods still had a coach, right? So did Michael Jordan. So I love that. Just a kind of a quick question here, because I actually love to stay more on the positive side of things. But when it comes to the challenges we're all facing in credit union land, what, I guess, I don't want to say what's keeping you up at night, but what's taking up your time or your thoughts that you're like, boy, we have to get this straightened out or fixed?
Big picture, I'd say the biggest challenge facing credit unions is really just the ability to evolve. And we need to continue to evolve, be stronger, faster, more nimble to meet the changing landscapes of the current environment. And I think those keep evolving. And that's really what I'm hearing. Credit unions in general, keeping them up, my CEOs up at night, is the ability to meet the changing financial services landscape. I'd say, really what we have to do is really focus on how can we advocate for credit unions? How can we work together? How can we make sure that we are evolving and moving at a much quicker pace?
What does that look like for the Minnesota Credit Union Network? I mean, has that changed in my house? Jill's been out of league land for a few years now. So has that environment changed? As you mentioned, you've been with the association long before you took the CEO role. So have you seen change there over the past few years?
When I jumped into this role, one of the ideas that I brought forward and are continuing to push is Network 2.0. We're not just going to be the Minnesota Credit Union Network. We are Minnesota Credit Union Network 2.0. And the idea that we need to continually evolve, and frankly, on the league side, that's going to have to be even faster than we've been doing it in the past. And so Network 2.0, we're going to quickly jump to Network 2.0, 0.1, 0.2, keep evolving. And I think of it like an app. Sometimes you get the updates and you're not quite sure what they updated, but there's probably some things in the background that's moving a lot better, a lot quicker, more efficiently there. Sometimes you get the app upgrade and you're like, wow, this blew me away.
Everything changed, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's not throwing out what we do. We have a very strong foundation, but it's really building on and continually tweaking and probably at a much quicker rate, pushing out those updates to our members in terms of who we are as your trade association.
I love that analogy because that's so true. We're all used to that with the apps we have on our phone or on our computer or whatever it happens to be, where sometimes they're little ones that you just don't even notice. It's just a patch or whatever, and then other times, like you said, it's like, wow, we didn't know that was even possible. So very cool. I like that. So a kind of a twofold question here. What has you most excited that you're working on in Minnesota? And then also, I know you're very well connected nationally. What has you, excited as well for our movement as a whole?
So in Minnesota, what I'm really working on is okay, I'm delivering Network 2.0. What does Network 2.1, 2.2, Network 3.0 look like? That is what I'm working on in Minnesota. So it's been really exciting to bring my team together and really start looking at that, talking to our members, kind of finding out where we need to be as the future trade association in 5 years. How do we start planning to get there, to continue to be relevant, continue to deliver the needs that our members need to grow and expand? I would say on the national level, really looking at collaboration. And I think that is really the key for us moving forward as an industry. And whether it's credit unions collaborating, which we've been helping to facilitate a lot of that, or leagues collaborating, I'm really excited about the potential that brings to each and every one of us to deliver better services to our members through that collaboration. And that's something that I'm so excited to really jump in and do more of.
I almost jumped into this question earlier when you were talking about filling the kitchen cabinet with folks, but I wanted to make sure we talked a little bit of credit unions first before I did that. When you think back to mentors along the way in your career to becoming a CEO, are there people that, have helped you along the way, maybe that you've leaned on? And on the flip side, what advice, you mentioned it earlier, and this is where I wanted to circle back about building that network. If, for the person who's sitting out there today that's listening, maybe they're in a management role, but someday they'd like to be the CEO. What does that look like as far as, I guess, the power of mentors in your career, as well as, the network to circle back on that?
I've been lucky to have some tremendous mentors throughout the industry. I've worked in the industry for 16 years now. And one of the greatest things about this industry or this movement is the relationships. And I don't know that I've seen another organization where everyone is cheering for you so strongly. They want to help you succeed. And that's one of the greatest things that I found through my work here. I would say one thing that's been tremendous for me and has really helped pushed me along on my career path is, like many things, you jump into something thinking you're, helping out others, and it ends up helping you. And that was the case. I helped start our Women's Leadership Network here in Minnesota. The goal of it was to provide professional development and leadership for women in the industry. And I was very focused on providing that to our members. But in turn, it made me realize I needed to focus on my own goals in my career, focus on my own professional development, and also gave me a number of mentors, cheerleaders along the way that really helped support me through my career journey as well. And really, it got me going on the path of seeking out those other mentors who are going to help me throughout my career journey.
Do you have that person that you know will always shoot it to you straight? I always think back, he's a former LP that you probably know, but early on in CUInsight, Paul Gentile was a guy for me that I would call and he'd go, "What the heck are you thinking, Randy? Why would you do that?" And I'd be like, "Tell me more." Not surprising, right? But, do you have people like that now that you're in this role that, and I think it's so important as CEOs to have, those maybe people outside the organization who you can bounce things off of when you are in that. It's an interesting position between leading your team and having a board above you, right? So
absolutely. I would say I have several people that I call when I want the honest answer. Right. I have several members who are not shy about giving me honest answers, but I think, I wouldn't say there's just one person, but I have several depending on the situation or kind of what I'm trying to grapple with. I think, jumping into this role, it's really about board governance and building that board relationship. So I've called several people on that. There's a couple times when, you just want guidance or you want to bounce something off of someone. And I have folks, mentors who are willing to just take the call, walk me through it. Sometimes for me, I'm a talker. You'll find that out. I like to talk through it. I'm not, that's how I get to my journey sometimes, is really just talking it out and thinking it through. And that helps kind of guide me to the end result or the direction I want to go to. So it's been great to have those mentors really working with me and giving me that frank feedback that I think some of us, we always need. That's always important for us. Have that straight shooter, right?
Yeah, you have to have it. I absolutely agree. So I'd like to kind of jump to that. That's I think back over the years as like friends of mine who like I've come up in credit unions with along the way got their first CEO gigs. And one of the surprises sometimes is the board relationship. Like that idea that you almost go from having one boss to 10. Or if there's a service corp or a foundation, there could be 20, 30 bosses. And obviously all your credit unions in Minnesota, really. But, Mark was there a long time. On the way out, did he give you any advice as far as board relations go? I'm thinking back to multiple people that I know we're both friends with, that I've had this conversation with when they first got, the CEO position. Maybe some of the surprises are like, holy smokes, I didn't know I was shielded from the board that much before. Is there anything, I guess, now that you're into it that you could share for, again, I love giving those kind of those hacks or advice or what you've learned along the way for that next person who's listening and wants to be in that chair someday?
I would tell them if you're looking at kind of jumping into the CEO role, it's key to have those board relationships, making sure that you have that open line of communication with your board and setting expectations accordingly. And I am just jumping into that process. I think in some respects, I'm walking in with an advantage of already having a relationship with all of our board members, 9 of them, plus my other 87 credit union bosses here in Minnesota. But really jumping in and building relationships. And I think the other key is setting expectations accordingly with the board to make sure that you're on track. I don't have Mark checking in on me every day. So, really making sure that I'm keeping the board informed on what we're working on and making sure that we align with direction.
That is so important. One of the things I love about hosting this podcast is I get to just kind of pick people's brains. So I heard this question, it was probably last year now on another podcast, but the question was, what was the greatest investment you've ever made in your career? And to give the example I always give was Warren Buffett answered it was a Dale Carnegie course. So is there something that you can think of that you're like, wow, I probably wouldn't be where I am today without that?
Randy, I think to to start to answer this question, I'm going to go back to the Women's Leadership Network. That really something clicked in my head with working with them on. I kept giving in my career and delivering, and that made me actually just take that gut check and take a step back and get me to really focus on my own professional development. And I think sometimes you get so busy focused on what needs to be done today, tomorrow. There's no end of work that you can do working for a trade association, and really prioritizing my own professional development, which meant I went back to school for a master's degree, which meant I started working with an executive coach, which meant I spent that time to really build up a group of mentors that could help me through my career journey. And even at that point, I didn't know where my career journey would lead, but I knew I wanted to continue to push myself and challenge myself and find the resources necessary to be able to do that and do it well, with a great group of people backing me up.
I love that so much. So I'd like to pivot a little bit to on the leadership side here and talk about when you're building a team. And not, obviously in my house, culture is a big topic since Jill's in the people business. But if we take a step back from that, when you're looking at, say, your executive leadership team, what are you looking for in people that, like, you want to be a core part of that, or if you do happen to be bringing somebody new on board?
As I'm looking at the leadership in our team, I'm really looking at shaping what we're going to need for the future. I've talked several times. I'm jumping in. I'm creating the trade association for the future for Minnesota credit unions. So really looking for collaborative is key to me, working collaboratively. We do so many things. We have 14 employees here at our league, and we all wear so many hats. So the ability to work collaboratively is key. I also really look at how can we make sure we bring those innovation ideas that'll really push the team forward. And I love the ability to spitball ideas, bring the team together, and really look at how do we get from here to there and how do we do it together. So I continue to look for those skills as I'm building my team. I think culture is so important. And one of the things that I'm most excited about jumping in and building my own culture here at the network. I know I've been here a long time. I'm not going to say we have bad culture, but just how do we continue to shift it, make it more collaborative, make it more innovative. And one of my key tenets that I continue to just push is, hey, we're going to work hard and play hard too. I want to make sure everyone is still having fun as well. I think that is so critical in any job, but especially a job like this where you have so much passion and there's so many things to do, is not forgetting to stop and have fun and acknowledge what you've done together as a team. So
complete scratch my own itch question here. But one of the things I love about our industry is how many people come up through the organization to the CEO chair. So like you mentioned, you have a relationship with everybody there because you've been there for many years. Anything that you could recommend for somebody who is coming up through the organization, they become the CEO on that transition. You're still colleagues, but you're also now the buck stops with you, right? Was there anything that I guess you did to make sure that you were starting to form that culture early that you're looking for that's collaborative when you went from being peer to boss? I don't know a better way to put that.
One thing, I jumped into the role and really wanted to make sure I was being transparent, open, honest. I think as I'm jumping into the role, I know a lot of pieces of the organization, but I also wanted to acknowledge what I do not know. And there may be things that I do not know. And so really jumping in and trying to be clear with our team, I shared my vision that I shared with the board through the interview process so that we're all on the same page. We all get where we're going, wanting to generate some excitement around that. And then I'm really leaning on the team to walk me through all the pieces that I'm less familiar with. So even though I've been here a long time, I've only done maybe half of our organization, and there's a lot that I'm not as familiar with. So quickly leaning on them to help me become an expert, or at least have service knowledge of everything that we're doing as a trade organization, which, believe me, is a lot.
It is a lot.
That'll keep me busy for a while.
I want to jump back to this one. You mentioned what you're looking for in your leadership team and leaders in the organization. Is there something that's just a no-go for you when you like hear somebody say something where you're just like, yeah, no, they're not going to fit here at the Minnesota Credit Union Network?
I would say my no-go is someone who says that is not my job. We wear so many hats, and at the end of the day, all of our jobs are working for Minnesota Credit Unions. So no matter what they need, we're going to find a way to make it happen.
The reason I laugh through that is because we are a small team also. So that would not flow well here either.
Some Mondays you come in and end up doing something you never realized you'd be doing for the week. And,
Absolutely.
but flexibility is key.
That's for sure. You've worked with a lot of CEOs, through the Minnesota Credit Union Network and through the Women's Leadership Network. And like I mentioned earlier, nationally as well. I often think that today, like the books that we grew up reading on leadership and management, the Jack Welches of the world and things like that, don't seem to apply as much. I'm not sure. Some of them haven't aged as well. What do you think today makes a good leader or CEO?
Well, Randy, I'm lucky to work right now with 87 of the best credit union CEOs in the industry. So it's actually an interesting viewpoint that I get, is being able to see CEOs from across the state and frankly from across the country and view their leadership styles, view how they put together their leadership team. Number one, great way to get great mentors as you're looking at, I really appreciate this or admire this. Couple things that I really appreciate and I think are keys for good CEOs, or ones that I most admire, is willingness to listen and willingness to take that feedback from your team. Not only taking it, but then taking action. Investing in the culture is huge. I think any CEO really, you can't just roll out a culture and say, here's our culture. You have to invest in it and live it and deliver that to your team, as well as giving that vision for the future. I view that as one of the CEO's key roles, is delivering a vision for the future for the team and helping them see how they can be a part of getting us there.
So you've mentioned, and I'll ask you this from a leader of the organization, is like you've mentioned the 2.0 vision, right, in the updates to the network. How do you make sure in today's ever-changing world that the organization is able to move fast and pivot, right? Like that idea of, one of the things that I keep scratching my head about is this idea of like a 5-year plan when things change in 2. It's we have to be able to go back and say, oh no, scrap that. Let's go this way. Because, to go back to it, CUInsight, we're a smaller organization. You mentioned the size of your organization. We don't have all the resources in the world, right? Like we have to make sure that we're allocating them where they can be most beneficial. So how do you move fast, I guess, and break things and pivot and do all that good stuff?
That's a great question, Randy. I'm looking forward to figuring that out. I would say one of our struggles as a league is, everything you do, it's hard to quit doing because someone really likes it. And so I really go with that guiding light of what is best for Minnesota credit unions as a whole. And I feel like you have to look at everything through that lens. How can we be the best partner for Minnesota credit unions? How do we invest the resources to get us there? And then how do we get out of the things that we don't need to be doing that aren't relevant? As I started thinking about this job, and especially the times that we're in, I kept coming back to this idea of resilient leadership. I think we have to continue to teach ourselves how we can evolve, but be nimble as we're going through transitions, as technology keeps changing. We're going to probably be at 10.25 before you know it, because we're going to have to keep evolving. But it's really being willingness and creating that culture that's willing to say, I know this was 5-year vision was this, but that doesn't make sense anymore. So willing to make those changes. And I think that does require leadership to be able to shift gears and be able to focus on what is most important at the moment.
You said something that we just recently did our strategic planning at CUInsight. All got together down in Greenville. And I remember thinking a little bit afterwards, I'm like, boy, we have a lot of great ideas, but I'm not sure we talked about one thing we were going to kill. But that idea of like, we've always done it. Some people like it, but is it the best today? I have no answer or even more than a comment on that. But I was like, boy, that's always a tough thing to do, is to get rid of something you've always done.
Well, I'm glad to hear it's not just us, that others are also dealing with that. I think it's always a struggle. And especially when you get a team together who gets excited, it's a lot easier to generate all the amazing new projects you can roll out, all the new features, all the new programs and new vision. It's always great to envision all the other things, and then fitting it into your staff schedule or duties is tougher and probably, less fun. It's always more painful to say, no, we're just not going to do that. But we do have to make some of those key decisions because we can't do everything, and we really have to focus our resources on what's the most important and what's the most impactful.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more there. A question to you on the workplace. You and I have been around since before the pandemic, and, often in credit unions and many financial services and other industries, the idea of remote work and things like that were kind of a no-go. Now it seems to be there's a lot of hybrid. There's people still remote, some are back completely in office, whatever it happens to be. But what does the career in credit unions look like to you if we're looking forward? I mean, it seems like it's already a little bit different if we want to compete with that. I never like to use the term war for talent, but there, it is that idea. We're competing with everybody else for talent. So what does that career in credit unions look like to you as we move forward?
I think the work experience in credit unions is going to be ever changing, and I find it interesting. There were so many lessons learned that really accelerated the movement towards the ability to hybrid or remote work through COVID. No one planned on it. No one was expecting it. But my viewpoint is we might as well take what we learned, what we unexpectedly all collectively learned through working through COVID, and leapfrogging off of it instead of just reverting back to the standard norms, as everyone is really in that search for talent. That's one of the key challenges I hear from my members, is the search for talent. It doesn't mean every job in a credit union is going to be fully remote. It really varies based on what your role is and what you need to do for your position. At the Minnesota Credit Union Network, we've remained a hybrid employer. We have some who work primarily remote. We have some who work primarily in the office, really looking at what works best for their work preferences. And I'm not going to tell you where you need to work from as long as you're getting your work and the job done. I think being unique as a trade association, most of our best work is not done in the office. Right. Our job is to go out and visit credit unions, visit our members, talk to legislators, talk to community members. Our job is to be out as the trade association, out meeting with our members. So if you're going to sit down and do work, I don't really care where it's from, as long as you're getting your job done. And I think every employer is really struggling with that mix, as well as creating that culture in that work environment. But I continue with the philosophy of, we didn't go through all that to just revert back. I feel like let's take what we learned and leapfrog off of those learnings that we all learned as we worked remote during COVID.
Absolutely. I agree with you. That's been something I've found interesting here recently, is it seems like there were a bunch of things that were working that people went back to kind of the way it was always done. And it's a head scratcher. I'm not saying the one way is right or the other way is right, but like you just said, that what we learned, we had a very fast adoption rate there. And I think we could springboard off that. So before I move on and we have a little bit of fun with the rapid fire questions, was there anything you were hoping that I was going to ask you that you wanted to talk about today that I didn't?
I actually was surprised that it's all about me and I haven't heard much about you, but maybe we'll have to take that discussion offline. I can hear about Africa, travel. You can say hi to Jill for me.
Absolutely. Oh, I feel like people get enough of me. So this was all about you. That's the way I like it. So
Randy, before we move on,
yeah.
I do want to add, I think, as I jumped into this role, it was a pretty interesting time, as there was really a national discussion about, whether leagues were relevant. And I really took a step back and, looked at, if I'm going to do this, how can I make sure that we are relevant in the future to our members? We can continue to survive. And I'm actually really excited about the future for credit unions. I think while there's a few challenges that we all know about, we have so much potential as credit unions, and I'm so excited for this industry. And I'm really excited to be in this position to help lead that charge. But I'm most excited about the collaboration that can happen within the industry to create that future where credit unions are not just surviving, but also thriving.
Let me ask you a question here, because I agree with you so much. One of the, I guess, I don't want to say it's a complaint. Maybe it's more of a fear that I've heard some smaller credit unions make, and I'm not sure if this flows through to leagues and their independence as well, but, often almost afraid to collaborate with the bigger credit union because then they think the bigger credit union will just merge them in. Or, go to the board and try to get that merger. Do you have that was not in my list of questions I sent you. Do you have any thoughts on that? Or, how do we get collaboration without the fear of acquisition? How about that?
As I'm jumping into this role, I'm not only focused on creating a strong culture within my team here at the network, but also wanting to create a culture within Minnesota credit unions. And that culture is one of collaboration. I think one of the keys to get to collaboration is first trust and relationships. And that's something, so we've been focused on really building that up through our events, through networking opportunities. We have monthly calls with our CEOs to really create that trust that helps lead to collaboration. Once you have those relationships built and that trust built, it's a lot easier to collaborate. So it's not a 0 to 60 proposition,
right? Yep.
But continuous work in process as we continue to try to get that, create the environment and create the culture where collaboration can happen and is encouraged, in fact.
I like that. Thanks for letting me put you on the spot there.
Hey, anytime. That's my job now, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. Okay, so now we get to have a little fun. It wouldn't be the CUInsight Experience without them. A few rapid fire questions. The questions are rapid, but your answers do not have to be. So, what was your first job? That first high school job or whatever that was?
My first paid job was timing track meets for my father. Little stopwatch. I was probably in 5th or 6th grade. You'd hit them when they hit the finish line and give your results.
I take it Dad was a track coach or an educator? Or?
Actually, times running races. So
awesome.
Occupational family hazard, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. My guess is Jill's would probably be, if she thought back on it, was keeping score at wrestling matches for her dad. So, when was the last time, either personally or professionally, you were amazed?
I saw a double rainbow last weekend, and that was
awesome.
Amazing.
With all the smoke from Canada, that seems pretty amazing that you did see a double rainbow.
Yes, it actually showed up. It was clouds parted. We haven't seen a lot of rainbows or sunsets or sunrises that aren't very hazy recently. So it was cool to see. I'd say professionally, I have to give a big shout out to my team. As I jumped into this role, I've just been amazed by them, their support, their willingness to jump in, their willingness to give that buy-in and start running has been so much fun. And it's been very amazing, humbling, but also gratifying.
That's beautiful. Is there anything Mara's currently working on, taking up that self-growth space?
That is a great question. I would say right now, I feel like I'm so far into jumping into this role that I haven't had as much time as I would like for self-growth. One thing that I have been doing is I've been doing media training.
Oh, nice.
Get me prepared for this role, but really focused on building our internal team, getting out to our members, meeting them, that I'm really hoping to focus on that, and then longer term, really focus on a number of the CEO roles that I want to excel at.
Well, this is going to kind of tie into that because you got to create some space for yourself too. I'm just going to tell you. No, the next question, many people as they're making their way to the CEO role, they've put a lot into their career. How have you balanced that inside, outside of work? I've been trying to get away from that work-life balance thing because as Jill would say, it's just one whole life, right? So any tips or hacks that you picked up along the way to keep that balance?
I'm really lucky to have my family. They're the ones who keep me grounded. They keep me humble. I have an amazing husband who actually helps out and does a lot with our kids, keeping them rolling on track. I think for everyone, it's not finding that balance. It's some type of integration and making sure you're hitting the important family events is critical, but trying to balance that out with getting your job done at work, pushing your career forward.
Absolutely.
When you find the solution, let me know, but it's a continual work in progress.
It sure
trying to fit
is.
all of it in. Sure. You know what? I would be a workaholic if I didn't have a family and kids, and it's good for me.
Yeah.
And so important, and the most important thing that I do.
Absolutely. What's the best piece of advice you ever received? And do you remember who gave it to you?
I'm thinking back on a retiring CEO who gave me advice, and this was prior to me having the job, and I'm maybe paraphrasing, but it was something to the effect of, Mara, just run with your passion, but on the way, don't forget to enjoy the ride.
Yeah, I love that. All right. What's the greatest album of all time? That one you can listen to front to back?
I may be showing my Minnesota roots. It's kind of hard to pick just one, but Bob Dylan, Blood on the Tracks is always one that I go back to.
That's fantastic. So here's a question that I added this season from NCUA Chairman Harper. Who's playing you in the movie or biopic of your life?
That's a tough one. Straight from the NCUA. Wow.
Right. Yeah. We were having dinner and he said he goes, I wish you would ask this. I'm like, that's amazing. So I added it, but I do have to give him credit.
I like it. I would go with Mara Wilson.
There you go.
First of all, she has an amazing name. Second of all, loved her in Matilda. And as Matilda, she kind of looked like I did back then. So
that's fantastic. What are you currently reading? Are there any books that you think like everyone should just read? Do you have a favorite?
I'm currently reading it's called The Culture Climb, and it's by a local author. Again, always doing work, both thinking about the culture that I want to build, which is key to me as I'm jumping into this new job, but also identifying potential future speakers for events.
Yeah.
I will admit, I also have a beach read on the side. I will not admit to what mind-rotting book that is, but it is beach season and lake season, and so that is my escape mindless book on the side that I can just not think as I read.
I would not be surprised if people start reaching out to you to find out what it is because they need a beach read also. So
I'm happy to take private messages on that.
When you hear the word success, who's the first person that comes to mind and why?
Someone I really admire is Angela Merkel. She was the first female chancellor of Germany. Probably a political tie-in there, but I've had a tremendous amount of respect for her for being in power for so long, working with so many different factions, as well as basically driving the EU. So that to me is impressive.
I feel like she was the one holding things together for the world for a little while there, so I can see why. Last question. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share or asks of our listeners today?
I'm really excited to be jumping into this role as president and CEO. I see a very bright future for credit unions. I think we all have to work collaboratively together, but I'm really excited about what we can do together. I look forward to any questions, any private messages if you want to reach out and connect. I'm excited to jump in and work with everyone and appreciate the opportunity to be on this, Randy.
Oh, thank you so much. One more last question. What's your poison? LinkedIn, email? How can people reach you?
They can contact me on LinkedIn at Mara Humphrey. You can follow me on Twitter as well. My contact info is also available on the Minnesota Credit Union Network website if you want to get in touch with me.
Awesome. We will link to that and everything else we talked about. Thank you again so much for being here today, Mara, and taking the time. I cannot wait to see you again, and I wish you all the success, hope and success in the world. So thank you again for being here, my friend.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun. Look forward to doing it again.
We will link to everything that Mara and I talked about in the show notes. A few things before we go. Please check out PSCU. They'll also be in the show notes. And learn more about PSCU TV. They are a longtime partner of CUInsight.com and the podcast, and I am so grateful for their support to allow me to have this much fun doing what I do. And my guess is Mr. Brian Scott over at PSCU is having a blast hosting PSCU TV too. Please also subscribe to the CUInsight Experience on all your favorite podcast players. We're on them all. And if you're looking for a book mentioned today on the show or any of the past episodes, a quick Google of the CUInsight Experience podcast book list and your next read can be on its way from Amazon. Last but certainly not least, I want to thank all of you for listening. Y'all rock, and I appreciate you all. Be well, friends.